Field of Dreams is the most poetic and gentle movie America ever made, but the fate of this cast was anything but gentle. Released in 1989, Field of Dreams was not just a sports movie with a little fantasy mixed in. It was a movie about time, about fathers and children, about memory. But behind the deeply American beauty of Field of Dreams was a chain of tragedies. Broken marriages, long illnesses, legends gone forever, someone dying in his sleep. That was the truth. The lives of this cast were sadder than a lot of the tragic movies we have ever known. So what really happened to them? Today we are going to look back at the 10 most unforgettable faces from this movie, see who is still here with us and who went away in pain. And stay with me to the end because I have got 5 really valuable facts about Field of Dreams itself. Number 1, Kevin Costner as Ray Kinsella. Kevin Costner was the biggest name in Field of Dreams. When the movie came out in 1989, he was 34. This year, he is 71. At that point, he was already rising fast after The Untouchables and Bull Durham, so Ray Kinsella came along right when Hollywood was starting to see him as the classic American leading man type, calm, tough, dependable, and masculine enough that other men looked at him with real respect. After Field of Dreams, he climbed even higher with Dances with Wolves, the movie that pushed him into true heavyweight star status. But the part that makes people look at Kevin Costner with more feeling today is not really the old glory, it is his private life. His marriage to Christine Baumgartner fell apart after 18 years and was officially finalized on February 16, 2024. They have 3 children together, and the divorce played out very publicly, very painfully, with legal fights and the pressure of fatherhood after the breakup. Costner later admitted he had gone through some tough times, felt beaten up by it, and now had to learn how to be a single father to 3 teenage kids. For a man already past 70, that was not a light hit. What makes this story heavier is that right in the middle of that private life cracking apart, Costner was pouring everything he had into Horizon. He put up his own money and even mortgaged his beachfront property in Santa Barbara to keep that project alive. That is a very Kevin Costner kind of move, older now, but still refusing to play it safe. But that gamble started off badly. Horizon Chapter 1 made only about $11 million in its opening weekend, which was far too weak for the ambition and the money he had poured into it. He also confirmed he was leaving Yellowstone while focusing on Horizon. So no matter how you look at it, this was a massive bet at an age when a lot of other people would have already chosen to rest. Then in 2025, everything got even messier. A stunt performer named Devin Labella sued Costner and the producers of Horizon Chapter 2, alleging that she was put into a violent simulated rape scene without proper advance notice, without enough protective procedures, and without the required intimacy coordinator. Costner denied the allegations, but the fact that it blew up at all was enough to show that Kevin Costner is no longer the spotless hero from Hollywood's prettiest years. And honestly, that is exactly what makes him feel more real in the eyes of a generation of men who already understand that life does not always hand you a beautiful ending. Number 2, Amy Madigan as Annie Kinsella. Amy Madigan is one of the reasons Field of Dreams still has so much life in it. As Annie Kinsella, she never disappeared behind Kevin Costner. Annie is the kind of wife middle-aged men remember easily when they watch a movie, smart, direct, strong-minded, and tough enough to stand beside her husband instead of just standing behind him. Amy Madigan was born in 1950. When the movie came out in 1989, she was 39. This year she is 76. Before this movie, she was already an actress who had been nominated for an Oscar for Twice in a Lifetime. Not many people remember that. Before acting, she had also been a rock singer in Los Angeles. So, from the start, Amy Madigan never had that polished, familiar Hollywood shine. After Field of Dreams, Amy Madigan did not go down the path of an A-list movie star like a lot of women from her era. She took the harder road, becoming a character actress with staying power, somebody people remembered for the weight she brought to each role more than for surface-level glamour. That was also her strength, but in Hollywood, especially for women, that is not always an easy road to survive. In recent years, Madigan has said very plainly that the opportunities for older actresses keep getting smaller, and she has never allowed herself to treat roles like something guaranteed. That is the bitter part of her story. No scandal, no noise, but quietly getting pushed farther away from the light by time and the Hollywood machine. Amy Madigan's private life, though, went in the exact opposite direction from Hollywood. She married Ed Harris in 1983, and they are still together today. More than 40 years with one person in that world is rare, but that does not mean her life has been free of loss. At the start of 2026, Madigan said that she and Ed Harris were living in a rental because their real house had burned down in the wildfires the year before, and rebuilding it could still take years. And then the most beautiful part came very late. In March of 2026, Amy Madigan won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress for Weapons exactly 40 years after her first nomination. When you look at Annie Kinsella back then and Amy Madigan today, what remains is not just beauty, it is strength. Number 3, James Earl Jones as Terence Mann. James Earl Jones was the kind of actor who only had to step into the frame and everything instantly felt heavier. When Field of Dreams came out in 1989, he was 58 already, a giant of the stage and screen for a long time. James Earl Jones was born in 1931 and died on September 9th, 2024 at 93. What made his life more special than most of his peers was this huge irony. The man with one of the most famous voices in America had once almost not been able to speak. His father left the family when he was still very little. He grew up with his maternal grandparents in Michigan, and because of that upheaval, he developed such a severe stutter that he stayed almost silent for years. It was a teacher who pulled him out of that stretch of life through poetry and reading out loud. That one detail alone is enough to make James Earl Jones unforgettable even before fame ever entered the picture. His private life was quiet, but not easy. His first marriage to Julianne Marie ended in divorce. His second marriage to actress Cecilia Hart lasted more than 30 years until she died in 2016 after a year-long fight with ovarian cancer. During that same stretch of life, Jones was also living with type 2 diabetes from the mid-1990s on. He once said the doctors found it after noticing that he was falling asleep while exercising. No scandal, no noise, but it was the kind of loss and illness that slowly wears a man down year after year. And maybe that is why James Earl Jones grew older with a quality that is very rare in Hollywood. He did not live off scandal, he did not rebuild his image, and he did not yell for attention. When he died at 93, what remained was not just a list of great roles. What remained was this feeling. James Earl Jones was one of the very few people whose voice alone became part of America's memory. Number 4, Timothy Busfield as March. In Field of Dreams, Timothy Busfield was the guy who brought uncomfortable reality right into the middle of a dream. Mark was not the kind of character audiences were supposed to love. When the movie came out in 1989, he was 32. This year, he is 69. At the time, he was not some unknown actor. He was already building real momentum thanks to 30-something, then won an Emmy in 1991 and also founded B Street Theater in Sacramento with his brother Buck Busfield. He was not a flash-in-the-pan star. He was the kind of American television actor who had the real skill to stand on his own. What makes Busfield's story heavier today is that his life once looked pretty peaceful. He went through 2 earlier marriages, then married Melissa Gilbert in 2013. For years, they looked like a mature private couple, no noise, no scandal, not living off publicity. So when Timothy Busfield's name showed up in criminal records in New Mexico in early 2026, it stopped being just another bad headline. It became the kind of fall that could wipe out the way people had seen him for decades. According to AP and People, Busfield was charged with 4 counts of criminal sexual contact of a minor and 1 count of child abuse tied to allegations from the set of The Cleaning Lady. He pleaded not guilty, and the case is still awaiting trial. Everything got even worse when older allegations came back into the picture, too. Melissa Gilbert said publicly that she had known about accusations before she married him, including a lawsuit in 1994 and an allegation in 2012. Those cases did not lead to criminal convictions, but set next to the 2026 case, they changed the whole picture around Busfield. Gilbert is still standing by her husband, saying she is not naive, not complicit, and that she believes he is innocent. But she also called this the most painful experience of their lives and said flat out that no matter what the legal outcome is, their future has already been shattered. This is not Hollywood. This is not an Emmy. This is a deeply personal tragedy, and we cannot just place the blame neatly anywhere. Number 5, Ray Liotta as Shoeless Joe Jackson. Ray Liotta did not appear as much as Kevin Costner, and he did not carry the same towering presence as James Earl Jones. But he was the one audiences remembered for a very long time. Ray Liotta was born in 1954. When the movie came out in 1989, he was 35. Just 1 year later, Goodfellas turned him into a name American audiences could almost never forget. Director Phil Alden Robinson picked Liotta for this role because he could naturally bring an air of mystery with him. To be honest, that was something Ray Liotta already had in him. What gave Ray Liotta's life more depth than a lot of stars from his era was that he grew up with the feeling of being left behind very early in life. Liotta was adopted when he was just 6 months old, and for years he carried very real anger about that. Only after reconnecting with his birth mother and biological siblings when he was already past 40 did he say he felt less angry and started seeing that story as part of his life journey. Maybe that is exactly what created that rough edge that always stayed with him, even in softer roles. Before Field of Dreams, he had already broken through with Something Wild and earned a Golden Globe nomination. So this was not some lucky guy drifting through a movie and then disappearing. This was a clearly rising actor, and Field of Dreams landed right in the stretch before he completely exploded. Liotta's private life was not a non-stop scandal story, but it was not spotless either. He married Michelle Grace, had one daughter named Carson, and later got engaged to J.C. Natolo. In 2007, he was arrested after hitting 2 parked cars in Pacific Palisades. He later entered a no-contest plea to reckless driving, got probation, took a short course, and paid a fine. It was not the kind of fall that destroys a career, but it was a very real public scratch. The saddest part came way too fast. On May 26, 2022, Ray Liotta died in his sleep in the Dominican Republic while filming Dangerous Waters at 67 from causes related to atherosclerosis, along with pulmonary edema, heart failure, and respiratory failure. Number 6, Gaby Hoffmann as Karin Kinsella. When the movie came out in 1989, Gaby Hoffmann was 7. This year she is 44. Field of Dreams was also Hoffmann's first feature film role, opening the door to a whole childhood in front of the camera that a lot of Americans who grew up with movies in the 1990s would recognize right away. But what makes Gaby Hoffmann's story worth talking about even more is her real life. She was born in 1982 in New York, the daughter of Viva, a face closely tied to Andy Warhol, and actor Anthony Herrera. Her parents split up early, and Hoffmann grew up mostly with her mother at the Chelsea Hotel, a place that was very famous but also very far from anybody's idea of a peaceful childhood. Hoffmann herself later said she grew up with almost no father in her life. She started doing commercials when she was still very little, partly because of money problems in the family. This was not the kind of child star life Hollywood carefully manages from start to finish. It was stranger, shakier, and a whole lot wilder. That is why when people look back at Field of Dreams, what Hoffmann has said feels especially memorable. In a conversation in 2024, she said she felt paternal energy from several male actors on set, especially Ray Liotta. But she did not feel that from Kevin Costner, the man who played her father in the movie. For a movie so tightly tied to fathers and children, that detail gives Hoffmann's story a layer that feels very human, very real, and a little sad too. What is impressive is that Hoffmann did not live forever off the glow of being a child star. After taking a break and studying at Bard College, she came back in 2007, then slowly built a very different place for herself. from the image people remembered from childhood. She went down the road of independent film and high-quality television, earning 3 Emmy nominations for Girls and Transparent. Right now, Hoffmann is still acting, has 1 daughter with cinematographer Chris Dapkins, and keeps showing up in new projects like Eric. Number 7. Burt Lancaster as Dr. Archibald Moonlight. Graham won 06 to 1.
This close to your dreams.
Some people step into a movie to make it better.
Like
Burt Lancaster stepped into Field of Dreams to give it age. That is the difference. When the movie came out in 1989, he was 76. He was born in 1913, had already won the Oscar for Best Actor for Elmer Gantry, and had lived long enough to go from a classic Hollywood heartthrob to the very thing Hollywood cannot create anymore, a legend. What matters here is that Field of Dreams came to Lancaster not in the middle of his peak, but at the end of the road. This is usually seen as his final feature film role. A year later in 1990, he had a stroke. After that, his acting career was basically over. For a lot of actors, old age is just the stage where they work less. For Burt Lancaster, old age was the real final chapter. That is why Moonlight Graham carries so much weight without ever showing off. Moonlight Graham himself was already a beautifully sad figure. A man who got exactly 1 game in the majors, never got the chance to bat, then left baseball behind and became a doctor. But when that role landed in Burt Lancaster's hands, it stopped being just the story of a ball player who missed his moment. It became the story of a whole life looking back at what it once dreamed of, what it might have touched, and then left behind. Older men get that right away. No explanation needed. 4 years after the movie came out, Lancaster died on October 20th, 1994 at 80, after a long decline in health from the stroke and, in the end, a heart attack. Looking at him in Field of Dreams. Now, what stays with you is not just nostalgia. It feels more like the last time movies still managed to keep a giant in the light before time carried him away. Number 8. Frank Whaley as young Archibald Graham. Frank Whaley is not the kind of face general audiences instantly remember by name, but that is exactly what makes him worth talking about. In Field of Dreams, he played the young Moonlight Graham, not a big role, not a loud one, but one that had to do something very hard, make the audience believe that the young man standing there would one day become the older man, full of regret, that Burt Lancaster later brought to the screen. When the movie came out in 1989, Whaley was 26. This year he is 63. What is even more memorable sits outside the movie. Frank Whaley grew up in Syracuse, New York, in a childhood that was not gentle at all. His father was a severe alcoholic, and that is not just some decorative detail for a biography. Later on, Whaley pulled almost the whole ugliest part of that stretch of life into Joe the King, the movie he wrote and directed himself in 1999. That movie was heavily based on his own childhood and his brother's, and it won the Waldo Salt Screenwriting Award at Sundance. To me, that is where Frank Whaley really shows up, not as a supporting actor who happened to be in a few famous movies, but as a man willing to take the most painful part of his life and put it on the screen. After Field of Dreams, Whaley did not go down the A-list star path. He took the steadier and harder road. Also in 1989, he had Born on the 4th of July, then later showed up in the Doors' Career Opportunities Pulp Fiction, Swimming with Sharks, and dozens of other movies. Number 9, Kelly Coffield Park as Dee. Kelly Coffield Park only passes through Field of Dreams as Dee Mark's wife, and if you look at this movie by itself, it would be very easy to miss her. When the movie came out in 1989, she was 27. This year she is 64. Back then, she was still credited as Kelly Coffield, but the interesting thing is, Kelly was not the kind of actress who just drifted through a classic movie and disappeared. For her, Field of Dreams feels more like an early touch point than the thing that defined her whole career. The place where American audiences really remember Kelly Coffield Park is In Living Color. She was part of the original cast from 1990 to 1994, and that was the real beautiful jump in her career. If you watched American television in the early 1990s, you know the kind of face this is. She did not have to be an A-list movie star, she just had to show up. and people knew who she was. When people looked back at the cast, they mentioned Kelly exactly as part of that era. For her, that was when the name Kelly Coffield Park really found its place. After that, Kelly followed a very real Hollywood path. Not too loud, not trying to force her way into superstar territory, just steadily doing the work and standing on her own professionalism. IMDb shows that she kept appearing in movies like Jerry Maguire's Scary Movie and later a lot of television roles. Her private life went in that same direction. Kelly married Steve Park, her fellow In Living Color cast member, in 1999, and the two of them have a son, Owen, and a daughter, Eliza. No major scandal, no explosive breakup, no life spread all over the public. Kelly Coffield Park moved through Hollywood in a much quieter way than a lot of other people on this list. A small role in Field of Dreams, a really beautiful breakout on television, then a life that stayed pretty solid and pretty private. And honestly, in Hollywood, holding on to a life like that is sometimes even harder than getting famous. Number 10, Art LaFleur as Chick Gandil. Art LaFleur was not the star in the center of the poster, not the guy who walked out and made the whole room go silent. He was the kind of face that only had to appear for a few seconds, and a movie suddenly had more weight, more life on it, more of that feeling that this was a world with real people living in it. In Field of Dreams, he played Chick Gandil, one of the Black Sox players. When the movie came out in 1989, LaFleur was 46. He was born in 1943 in Gary, Indiana, and died in 2021 at 78. With Field of Dreams, the most interesting thing tied to him was actually the casting session. In a 2011 interview, LaFleur said that after reading for the part, he and a group of other candidates were taken out onto a field to actually play ball and see who really looked like a ball player. He ran straight out to first base, saw that the guy he was up against could barely throw a baseball, and told himself he might actually get this part. After that, the whole group even had to get to Iowa early to practice with old gloves and wooden bats because the filmmakers wanted them to really look like players from a lost time. That fit Art LaFleur perfectly. He did not act athletic. He looked like somebody who had actually been there. After Field of Dreams, LaFleur did not explode into a major star. He took the much steadier road. He became one of the most familiar character actors in American movies, from The Sandlot to The Santa Claus, with more than 100 roles, big and small. His private life was not noisy either. He stayed with his wife Shelley for 43 years, and they had 2 children, Joe and Molly. The heaviest part of the story comes at the end. LaFleur fought atypical Parkinson's for 10 years before dying on November 17, 2021. His wife called him a man who was larger than life. All right, we have gone through the whole cast, but do not rush off yet, because some of the little stories behind Field of Dreams are honestly almost as memorable as the movie itself. First, there is the story about Shoeless Joe Jackson and Ty Cobb. In the movie, Joe talks about Cobb with a line so sharp, it makes you laugh the second you hear it. Basically, he says, nobody could stand the man when he was alive, so the whole bunch told him to get lost. But real life was different. The two of them were actually pretty close. Later on, when Jackson was older and running a liquor store in South Carolina, Cobb once stopped by to buy bourbon. Jackson looked at him like he was a stranger. Only when Cobb had to ask Joe, "Don't you remember me?" did Jackson answer that. Of course he did. It was just that he never thought anybody still wanted to remember him. And the Burt Lancaster story is pure old Hollywood. While they were making the movie, he did not realize Timothy Busfield was also an actor. He thought Busfield was part of the crew, so he asked him to go get water and bring him a chair. Just picturing that is funny enough on its own. Amy Madigan also has a really sweet little story. While they were filming in Iowa, she was once invited to stand behind the bar and mix drinks at a local place, just because the owner had no idea she was an actress. It is a small detail, but it fits Amy Madigan perfectly. She has that everyday quality that makes people believe she really belongs there. James Earl Jones, though, had a funny little contradiction. In the movie, he delivers one of the most famous speeches about baseball, but in real life, he was not actually that passionate about baseball. And still a few years later, he went on to play another character tied to the sport in The Sandlot. And finally, it was a good thing Burt Lancaster changed his mind. At first, he turned down the role of Doc Graham. Later, a friend who loved baseball told him he absolutely had to do this movie. He listened. And honestly, without Lancaster, Field of Dreams still might have been good, but it absolutely would have lost something very special. Some movies you watch and then leave behind. Field of Dreams is different. This movie stays with you longer, especially if you are a man. Maybe because it has baseball. Maybe because it has that beautiful little touch of fantasy from the era when American movies still knew how to dream. But deeper than all that, it stays because it touches the things men usually do not say out loud. Their youth, their fathers, the things they never got to fix, and that moment when they realize time is not standing around waiting for anybody. Looking back at the cast today, what hits people is not just that they got older, passed away, or changed in one way or another. What really lingers is that we have also traveled a long way since the first time we sat down and watched this movie. And maybe that is the real power of Field of Dreams. It does not just tell a story, it holds onto a piece of memory for a whole generation. If you still remember when you first watched Field of Dreams, or which actor in this cast moved you the most, tell me in the comments. And if you love classic American movies like this too, do not forget to subscribe to the channel so we can see each other again in the next video.